The moment I saw Karol G wearing this crochet set on one of her concerts, I knew I had to make it. Karol G is honestly iconic. I went to her concert in 2022 in Vancouver, and in that concert I realized she's a really beautiful human being. Just like super kind, really genuine. Maybe it's because I love her so much, but that's kind of how I felt. Anyways, without further ado, let's make some crochet pants. Okay, so we're going to start with a slip knot. Maybe I'll teach you how to do that. The way I do it is I wrap the yarn around these two fingers, leaving a tail. I'm going to bring the back strand forward. Do that again, back strand forward. And then the back strand, I just pull it up. If you let everything go, it's going to create this like circle with like an A shape. And now you can just pull the little tail and the strand attached to the ball of yarn down, and it's going to give you that knot. And the knot is adjustable, so you can pull on the one attached to the ball of yarn to make it smaller. So if you need to watch that again or more slowly, then just make sure you use the settings to change the speed. And when you're ready, we're going to begin by creating the waistband. So because you're going to create the chain and double crochet at the same time, I'm going to use a stitch marker just to show you so it's easier to see. We're going to begin with a chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And now into the first chain that you made, we're going to create a double crochet, but it's going to work just a little bit differently. You're going to yarn over, go into that chain, pull up a loop. So you have 3 loops on your hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through 1 only. By doing this, you're creating the chain that technically the stitch comes out of. And this is where you're going to go into next. So again, just for teaching purposes, I'm going to put a stitch marker into that little loop that you just created because it's going to be easier to see later. Currently, you have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2. So now you have a double crochet on top of a little loop. And that's important because that's where we're going to work into next. So yarn over, go into that spot where the stitch marker is, pull up a loop, 3 loops on your hook. You're going to start by only going through 1 loop. And I'm going to move my stitch marker to that loop so it's easier to see later. I hope this isn't making it more confusing. I just think it's easier to see the visual of where you need to work into. Let me pull everything down. 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And now where the stitch marker is where I'm going to begin my next stitch. So I'm going to leave that stitch marker on there, and I'm going to do it without so that there's nothing blocking your view. Yarn over, go into that spot, pull up 1 loop, yarn over, pull through only 1. This is where I'm going to work in the future. And now I'm going to complete my double crochet, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So what this looks like is I've got my double crochet here, and this at the bottom here is the spot where I want to work my next double crochet into. Yarn over, go into that spot, pull up 1 loop. Now yarn over, pull through 1 only, and from here complete the double crochet. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. I'm going to do it once again, yarn over. This is the spot down here. Pull up 1 loop, yarn over, pull through 1 only, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And now let me show you what's happening. I'm going to remove that stitch marker. It may have stretched it out a little bit, but what's happening is you've got double crochets at the top, and at the bottom you've got these like chain looking loops. And the reason why I like doing this is because it's easier to measure against your body and then be able to just close it off when it goes around your waist. Versus doing a long chain, having the issue of twisting, then doing the double crochet, And it's just like, I did it enough times and it was an issue. So I was like, I'm just going to try this method. And I found it better. So if you want to do the chains, then close it off and then do your first row as double crochets, you can. I just found this to be easier to begin with. So I'm going to continue doing this, going into that spot, pulling up a loop, yarn over, pulling through one only. From here, completing a double crochet. This is going to be my waistband. So of course I want to make sure that I measure around my waist. In the piece that I already made, I have 69 stitches around. So let me just show you here what it looks like. This is the top here. So I made however many stitches I needed, measured against my body, and then at the end, you're going to be connecting it, and there's going to be a gap here that you're just going to sew later to close it off. But anyway, in my case, I did 69 stitches in total. I'm not going to do that for this piece because I just want to teach you the logistics and it's going to take me longer. So I'm going to cut that number in half and I'm going to do those stitches and meet you to show you the rest of the rows. Okay, so I just did 35 stitches. Again, this is just for a sample piece. This is not the size that goes around my waist, but I just want to show you the logistics of then growing this piece, which I don't need the whole amount for. So in your case, you've measured against your body. This wraps around your waist exactly where you want it, whether that is a high, mid, or low rise. In my case, it's high-waisted, so I will need to work more rows from the waist area to the crotch. So those are important things to know because for me personally, I made 69 stitches total, including the chain 3 that you start with. You know, that chain 3 that you began, that counts as a stitch, plus 68 others for a total of 69. That is my number. You will have a different number. Okay, so now we actually want to close this off, right? So that it goes like that. And so you can go ahead and just flip it. Let me just put my yarn where it needs to be. Okay, so we're going to grab the piece, close it off. You, of course, the way that you check this is that the bottom of like the chain is at the bottom on both sides when you flip it like this. You want to make sure that's not twisted. And so now we're going to do a slip stitch into the top of the chain 3 that you started with. So we find that top chain into there, do a slip stitch. Now this will be the end of row 1, which also includes the chain. So now for row 2, we're just going to do a chain 3. This is how we're going to start every row, and you're going to flip your work. We're going to be flipping our work back and forth in every row. And again, there is a little gap here, but we're going to be closing that off by sewing it later, so don't worry about that. So now we're going to go ahead and do, for this row, just do 1 double crochet into each stitch all the way around. And so here, just be careful. This here is the slip stitch. This is not a stitch, so you don't have to go into there. The top of the double crochet is here. That's something important to do in every row when you begin it. Make sure that you don't go into the slip stitch or you'll be adding a stitch. So into the top of the first double crochet, 1 double crochet, and then you want to do a double crochet into each stitch all the way around. So do that. I will meet you at the end of the row to show you how to close things off. Okay, so I just did 1 double crochet all the way around, except for the last stitch, because I just want to show you this here is the last stitch of the previous row, and the other is the chain 3 that I kind of started my current row off of. So just make sure that you're going into the last stitch only and you don't confuse these two. Another thing you can do is just count your stitches in every row to make sure that you have the same amount. So for row 2, you should have the same amount of stitches as the previous row because you only did 1 stitch per stitch. So this is my last double crochet into the last stitch of the previous row. And now what I'll do to finish row 2 is just do a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3 that I started with. So onto that top chain, insert my hook and do a slip stitch. So this here is the end of row 2. Again, this is not against my body. This is just a sample size. And now one thing I want to mention is if you want to do this kind of style where, you know, it's like different colors kind of combined, then you really just change color when you feel like. You're going to have to connect them. If you're just doing one color, then ignore this. But if you're doing multiple colors, change colors whenever you wish. So we're going to move on to row 3. For that, we're going to chain 3, which counts as your first stitch, flip your work. And now this row, we're actually going to start creating an increase. So the way that I've done it is we're going to be working double crochet into each of the next 11 stitches. So this first one, remember, is the slip stitch, so don't go into there. You go into the first double crochet. I'm going to go into 11 stitches with 1 double crochet per stitch. So I'll meet you when I'm done that. Okay, so I just did 1 double crochet into each of the next 11 stitches after the chain 3. But again, because the chain 3 counts as a stitch, I technically right now have 12 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And now I'm going to do an increase. So into the next stitch, I'm going to do 2 double crochets into the same stitch. That's 1 and another one into the same stitch for an increase. So for this row, this is what you want to do all the way around. You're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches, then increase. 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches, then increase. Again, it's 12 because here you have the chain 3, which counts as a stitch, plus 11, for a total of 12. This is the logistics of creating your first increase. This is just going to start opening up because obviously your waist is smaller than your hips. And so this is the beginning of those increases. Do this all the way around, doing 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches, then increase. And now something important that I want to mention is that when you get to the end, even in my sample piece, which obviously is not the right amount of stitches, but when you get to the very end, you may not end at a perfect repetition. That's because we're creating a piece that's measured against our body. So you're not going to end at a perfect repetition, meaning you're not going to end with an increase, and that's okay. You literally just go up until where you can. Let's say I finish my last increase here, and I only have 4 stitches left. Then you would just do 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. That's just, it's the only way I can teach you this, and you're measuring against your body. It won't be perfect numbers for every single one, but it works. For example, in this piece, I ended up having to do 1 double crochet into each of the last 4 stitches at the very end of the row. So I finished with my increase and then did 1 double crochet into each of the last 4 stitches. And that's okay. So, and it's going to work. It's going to just open up evenly. As you like go down, when you put it against your body, it does this. So that is the explanation for row 3. I'm going to do this all the way around. 1 double crochet into each of the next 12, increase, and I'll meet you at the end. Okay, I just did my last double crochet into the last stitch. To finish off this row, I'll just do a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3 that I started with. And this here is the end of row 3. This is your first increase row. Now we're going to chain 3 to begin row 4 and flip your work. Row 4 and 5 are just going to be rows of 1 stitch per stitch, meaning you're going to do 1 double crochet into each one of the stitches of the row. So we begin by skipping the slip stitch, going into the top of the first stitch with a double crochet. And you're going to do this all the way around, just 1 double crochet in each stitch. Again, this is row 4. I'm going to just do a stitch per stitch, and I'll meet you at the end. Okay, I just went all the way around and did my last stitch. So to finish off row 4, we're just going to do a slip stitch onto the top of the chain 3 that you started with. And now we can begin row 5, and row 5 is the exact same as row 4. So chain 3, flip your work, skip the slip stitch, do 1 double crochet per stitch all the way around. So do that, and I'll meet you at the end of row 5. Okay, I just went all the way around, and now I'm just going to finish off my 5th row by doing the slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. And now what we have going on is we've got the waistband at the top. Then we have our first row of increases. So you have increased, for example, in my case, I began with 69 stitches. By doing that repetition of increases, I increased my piece by 5 stitches all the way around. So you only really have 5 stitches more than you previously did. Then after that, you have 2 rows of the same amount of stitches after the increase. So here is something to know. If you needed to open even wider based on your body type, then you want to make sure that you end up with more increases. For that, you would have to just do your increases sooner. So rather than doing it every 12 stitches, you could do it every 10, 9, 8. You kind of choose depending on how much wider you need it to grow. In my case, another important note is that I'm going to block it. So my piece feels a little snug right now, but after blocking it, I know it's going to grow maybe even just an inch. And so that's good for me. This here is the end of row 5. And now I kind of just want to explain to you the logistics of increasing it even further. And I'm going to let you take it away. So row 6 here, we're going to begin by chaining 3 and flipping our work. This will be a row of increases again. The way this piece is going to work, we do our row of increase, 2 rows of 1 stitch per stitch, increase row, 2 rows of 1 stitch per stitch, increase row, 2 rows of 1 stitch per stitch. That's how you're going to grow it evenly, outwardly like that. So you did your 3 chains. We're starting row 6 by always skipping that slip stitch. That's not a stitch. And we're going to do 1 double crochet into each of the next 12 stitches. So this will give me a total of 13 stitches before the increase. And if you notice, that's 1 more stitch than my previous increase row. So let me just do these 12 and I'll meet you when I'm done. Okay, so I've got 12 double crochets after the chain 3, meaning I have a total of 13 stitches. And now I'm going to do an increase. So 2 double crochets into the next stitch. Moving forward, this is the repetition I want. I'm going to do 1 double crochet into each of the next 13 stitches and then an increase. And so you'll notice that here, my first row of increases, I had 12, then increase. Here I have 13, then increase. If your number of stitches is different, because again, you're working against your body, so if you did your increases more often or less often, then that's the logic you want to follow. However many stitches you did on the first row of increase before the increase, then you would just add 1, and then that's your second row of increase number before the increase. So I'm going to now do 1 double crochet into each of the next 13 stitches and then increase all the way around, and I'll meet you at the end of the row. Okay, I just went all the way around, and again, this is just a sample piece, so I'm not, but even with your big piece, you're not going to finish off with a perfect repetition, and that's okay. So however many stitches you did at the end, when you come around, you're just going to do a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3 to close off this row. This here is the end of row 6. Now row 7 and 8 will be 2 rows of the same, just 1 stitch per stitch. As always, you start your row with 3 chains, flip your work, and now we would just skip the slip stitch and go into the first stitch with a double crochet and do the same thing all the way around. We finish the row the same way we have all this time. You just do a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. So this will be row 7 and 8. Your row 9 is going to be a row of increases. And logistically, you're just going to add 1 more stitch before the increase than you did on your previous increase row. So for example, my previous increase row has 13 stitches before the increase. My next increase row should have 14 stitches before the increase. And then after that, I'll do 2 of just 1 stitch per stitch. My next increase row would have 15 stitches before increase. And so in my case, again, I'll show you the big piece. I have 5 rows of increases, and in between them I have rows of double crochets, which is just 1 stitch per stitch. And so after my 5th row of increases, I'll just make sure that I have enough rows to get down to the crotch area. So I added all the rows that I needed to get to the crotch area. Another thing you can do is grab your measuring tape and measure the point of the waist down to the crotch. The same amount of inches you should have in this piece, because then of course it's going to cover the area that you needed to cover. So mine said 10.5, but because I'm going to be blocking it, it's going to grow a little bit. So yeah, mine right now is 10 inches and I think that's perfect. So now we're just going to add the leg hole. So go ahead and grab a stitch marker and your measuring tape as well. So ideally you want obviously this to be even, right? Like both your legs in like reference to the piece. So what I'm going to do is we're going to measure how wide this piece is. It's not perfect to show you on my screen, so I'm just going to move it. But this is approximately 18 inches, right? So at my 9th inch, that's like the middle point. So essentially, we're just going to place a stitch marker in that stitch. And, I mean, technically, if this is like perfectly flat, that should be your first stitch, those chains. So this is where, not into that stitch, in the one in the other side of the piece. So when you have it flat like this and you fold it, the stitches are hopefully, you know, kind of just like stacked behind one another. So the stitch that is immediately behind the middle point, that should also be the middle point of your other side of the panel. This is one way to see it, because you know you just finished the row, so it's kind of easier to see it like that. We can go ahead and flip it as well, you know, and just measure on this side, because even right now it feels a little bit crooked. So let me do that again. Going to measure here 18 inches. See, it was actually not right. So just be careful. You can go ahead and flip the work. Use your measuring tape to determine where the middle point is. So in my case, I actually have to move it 1 over to the left. Let's double check here. Maybe even 2 over. And then to triple check that this is correct, we want to count our stitches to the right and to the left of it. I have 23 stitches on either side of the stitch with a stitch marker. So now we're going to begin the leg hole. We're going to chain 10. This is kind of like a normal gap, like length that's going to go under. But you definitely want to go ahead and measure this. Again, it's like put it on. Let's see, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you need more chains than this, then go ahead and do that. If you need less, go ahead and remove. Basically, you should try this on. Sorry, we're going to slip stitch to the stitch with the stitch marker, because then otherwise you don't really have anything to try on. So remove the stitch marker, and we are going to connect this to that stitch with a stitch marker. There we go. Now you can pull up a loop so you make sure you don't lose it when you try it on. And essentially this is going to go under your crotch. So try this on, and when it fits, or if it doesn't fit and you need it bigger, add chains. If you need it smaller, remove chains. Okay, so now we're going to begin the leg, the first leg. So we're going to chain 2, which counts as the stitch of this, like this row, the first stitch I mean. And now you're just going to do 1 double crochet into each stitch all the way around. When we get to the chains, I'll show you what to do. You're basically just doing 1 double crochet per chain as well. But I'll meet you there so we can do that together. Go ahead and do 1 double crochet up until you get to the chain part, and I will meet you there. Alright, so I've gone all the way around and I've come to the chains now. So I ended up doing 1 more. I chained 11, by the way. So I know I have 11 chains. I want to end with 11 double crochets there. So let's see here. I'm going to go and find my first chain. It's a little bit twisted, so just make sure you're going to the same side of the chain when you work it. So here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Of course, if you have less chains than me or more chains than me, you would want to have that same number, but just make sure that you have that same number every time. I mean, at this point moving forward, then you will for sure, but just make sure that you have the same amount of double crochets as you did chains. And so here, you guys, we're going to do a slip stitch to the top of the chain 2. This is my mistake. We've been working a chain 3 for a double crochet, so that's my bad. This one here, it won't really make a difference, but moving forward, we're going to do chain 3. This is a chain 2. Go ahead and do a slip stitch to the top of the chain 2. And this finishes the first row of the first leg. And now it's quite simple. Now we're just going to continue working. I'll show you row 2, and the rest of the leg is essentially the same, the repeat of row 2. So let's begin with a chain 3 and flip our work. You're going to flip your work every time to make sure that the seam is straight. We're going to go ahead and do a double crochet into each stitch. Into the first one, you already have this chain 3, which counts as a stitch. So you're going into the second double crochet with a double crochet. And you're going to do double crochets all the way around. I'll meet you to finish this row together. And then you can take it away because you're just going to repeat row 2 until you have the length of the pant. Okay, I just went all the way around here. And now we're just going to close this off. We're going to do a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. This here is the end of row 2 of the leg. And now you're going to start with a chain 3, flip your work, and do this all over again. Basically row 2, do it again. Remember that the first little thing you see is the slip stitch, just like you did for this part. So you're not going to go into there because otherwise you'd be adding a stitch. And from now on, you just repeat row 2 back and forth all the way until you have the length. Do that, and then I'll show you how to do the next leg. Okay guys, I just finished my first leg. I've left it a little smaller because I'm going to block it, and that's going to make it longer and a little bit wider. So if I end up having to add more rows after blocking, I'm going to do that, but I'd rather just leave it where it's at because of how much it's going to grow. So I just want to show you right now, this is the back of the pant. I moved it so you could see a bit better. So I'm seeing the back of it, which is like at the top here, it's not connected, right? So that's what I'm looking at. And right here, I'm going to connect the yarn to start the second row. Because I'm using a lot of colors, I just don't want the crotch area to be kind of weird. So I'm still going to stick with the same color that I was doing on the other leg. So I'm going to make a slip knot. And I'm going to join it into, let me just show you here. So I have the one leg, right? And then the chain 11 that I did to, like for the leg space. So I'm going to look at my stitches. From here is where I connected that chain. So I'm going to go one stitch to the left of it into this double crochet, insert my hook, grab my new yarn, and pull it through. Here we're going to chain 3. That counts as our first double crochet. And I'm going to go around all the way. So I'm going to go around the circumference, and then when we get to the chain space, I will meet you to show you where you're going to work your stitches into. Okay, so now I've done double crochets all the way around. I did it into the last double crochet of the side, and now I've come into the chains. So there's the back of the chain that you didn't work into. So I'm just going to use a needle here to show you. The back of the chain is this loop here. So we're going to be working into these loops, which is the back of the chain 11 or whatever number you had that you did for that leg space. So we're going to go into that space. We're going to go into the first one here. and do a double crochet. And then into the next. So you're just going to essentially the back of the chain, like the other loop of the chain. And at the end, you want to make sure that you finish with the same amount of stitches that you had on the other side. In my case, it's 11 because I chained 11. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Okay, and here I have a couple of other stitches before I get to the chain 3 that I started in. Let's see. I've got like one more, technically. I will try this on to see if there's like a gap that I missed, because technically here I should just close this off. This is where my chain 3 came out of. So I can just go ahead and do a slip stitch to my chain 3. I'll likely just do that. If you feel like this is like too open, it's going to be at the crotch, so you won't really notice it. But just in case, you could also do a double crochet here. You don't need to. You could also just count however many double crochets you have around here, compare to the first row of the other leg, and see if you need to add or remove a stitch, or if your stitch count is the same. In my case, I'm actually just going to leave it like this. I just did my slip stitch. And now in terms of my design, I'm going to check my color. I think my next row is also the same color blue for the leg. So I'm just going to do that. But again, the same way that you did in the other leg, we're going to start with a chain 3 and then flip your work. This is now a bigger piece, so it's a little bit harder, but let me just flip it over. And so now I'm just going to be working into like one double crochet into each stitch. Again, the first one is just your slip stitch, so don't be confused and don't go into that. We're just going to do one double crochet per stitch all the way around. And this is exactly what we did to make the first leg. So now you can just go ahead and repeat that. You're going to start your rows with a chain 3, flip your work, one double crochet per stitch all the way around. And you're going to finish with a slip stitch to the top of the chain 3. And that's how you work the second leg. So easy peasy. I'm going to make this as long as my first leg, of course. Block it. Show you the result. And then we're just going to add a little waistband to make sure that I can cinch. Well, sorry, it's not really a waistband. It's going to be a string that's going to go through the waist. And that's going to help you just cinch in that top and make it more fitted to the body at the top of the pants. So we are going to close this off. This is the back of the pants, and I'm just going to quickly show you what I'm going to do. Obviously, you can go ahead and sew it in however you want. If you don't have a long enough tail to sew with, then you can go ahead and just add the same color, you know, to like attach it. So I just pass it through the top of that first stitch, and I'm going to pass it back to the other side. I don't think I'm the best sewer, you guys. It's not my strong suit, so honestly I kind of just do what I feel. The important thing is to make sure that like this is not going to come off, so I'm just going to thread it through the stitch and then hide it, and then I'm going to knot it. Again, this is not necessarily the best technique. If you have a better one, please go ahead. Just gonna hide it through. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just unravel these. Like unravel the yarn. This is 4 little strands. And here I'm just gonna create a knot. Doing that. Knot it twice. One more for good luck. And it doesn't really matter if it's there, you know, like this is kind of the point of the pant. Like this is going to be inside for me. I want to be looking at the front of the pant when I add my string. And so what I did was I found the middle point, like this may help you to have them on. And so the middle point, you can go down from like the crotch upwards, or you can be wearing them and then determine the middle point. You're going to create a chain that is able to go around it, but also you can tie it and you like the length of the bow. So I made a chain and then I kept putting it around me and testing out the bow. We're going to find the middle point. You're going to find the second row, and from here you're going to insert the chain from inside to outside, and we're going to be threading this through. What I did is I did it every 4 little holes. So 1, 2, 3, 4 into this 4th hole. I would now bring it this way until it's tight, right? Making sure that, you know, this doesn't change very much. And then I'm going to now find 4 holes to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4 into that 4th one. Thread it through, kind of like shoelaces, right? So it's going to be exposed every 4 holes. And you continue doing this all the way around. This is honestly so helpful to make sure that it's cinched at the waist. It's a very easy thing to do to it. Very happy with that. And you are all done with these pants. I am obsessed with this design.